Hello everyone and welcome to our first DEB Talks for 2023. I hope your year has started off in a positive way. Ours certainly has, and as a team we're having a great start to the year. I'd like to follow on from the discussion about the release of the new Pantone colour Vivid Magenta. Now, as designers, we love to use new things and beautiful colours that are bold and stimulating. But we need to be careful how we use it. We can't get too carried away. So how much of a good thing is too much? Stimulate or not stimulate? That is the question. Well, the answer is we need to consider both. There are times it is good and other times where it can lead to challenges for residents and staff. I think anyone that works in aged care would be aware that overstimulation can be just as much of an issue as understimulation, especially for residents living with dementia. We know that the ability to stay mentally engaged is compromised by dementia, and therefore it becomes harder to pay attention or even to stay engaged. So overstimulation comes in many forms. It can be noise, it can be visual, or even just too much clutter. One of the things I personally observe when visiting memory support units is that quite often the TV is left on. It's very loud and yet no one is even watching it. We know from research that this type of overstimulation can be overwhelming and can result in fatigue or agitation. And I think the interesting thing is when speaking with staff, it is obvious that many of them are actually totally unaware that this is even an issue. So education on the environment is sadly lacking. We know that colour is a powerful tool and can be used in a positive way, such as using blues and greens, which are soothing, restful, peaceful colours, and therefore they're great to use in bedrooms. However, on the flip side, we need to be careful because too much of a good thing can have a negative effect and make the area feel cold. So there is an art in getting the balance right. Colours such as Vivid Magenta can act as an appetite stimulant, but you wouldn't have the entire plate magenta. Otherwise, it is way too stimulating and will have the opposite effect and discourage people from eating. So we need to be careful how we use it. We know that colours in the red family actually do increase the appetite by increasing your metabolism, which is why red is such a popular colour in restaurants. Look at fast food chains like McDonald's, KFC, Pizza Hut and Red Rooster. They all use the colour red, and that's not by accident. Marketing companies are clever at how they use colour, and they've been using the psychology of colour for many, many years. So colour can stimulate in a good way or it can overstimulate in a bad way. And please, architects out there, stop using so much grey in your interior selections in an aged care facility. Grey is perceived as depressing and the absence of colour makes it dull. The other thing to take into consideration with colour is also personal associations. So whilst we discuss blues and greens being more restful and peaceful, you may have, for example, a resident that had a beautiful garden full of lovely pink roses, and therefore having some elements of pink in her room will make it feel familiar and therefore make her feel more at home. Sometimes we don't even understand why. So colour is a science and it isn't straightforward. I would suggest getting very familiar with the key principles of designing for people living with dementia that were produced by Professor Richard Fleming and Kirsty Bennett. Adopting these principles when designing spaces to me is critical. Two of the principles talk about helpful and unhelpful stimulation, and I'd just like to touch on those principles now. So principle 4 is about reducing unhelpful stimulation. Because dementia reduces the ability to filter stimulation and attend to only those things that are important, a person with dementia becomes stressed by prolonged exposure to large amounts of stimulation. The environment should be designed to minimise exposure to stimuli that are not specifically helpful to the resident, such as unnecessary or competing noises and the sight of signs, posters, places and clutter that are of absolutely no use to a resident. The full range of senses must be considered. Too much visual stimulation is as stressful as too much auditory stimulation. So using colours such as Vivid Magenta carefully is important, and consider using it in splashes of colour rather than blocks of colour. Principle 5 is optimise helpful stimulation. Enabling the person with dementia to see, hear and smell things that give them cues about where they are and what they can do can help to minimise their confusion and uncertainty. Consideration needs to be given to providing redundant cueing. For example, providing a number of cues to the same thing, recognising that what is meaningful to one person will not necessarily be meaningful to another. Using text and image in signs is a simple way to do this. However, there's another whole talk I can do actually on signage and minimising signage. Encouraging a person to recognise their bedroom through the presence of furniture, the colour of the walls, the design of light fittings and or the bedspread is a complex one. Cues need to be carefully designed so that they do not add to clutter and become overstimulating. So using the example of the lady who had the garden full of bright pink roses, and therefore for her, pink was a positive reinforcement. But on the flip side, you may have had a grandma that smacked you all the time and she always wore a pink jumper. So your association with pink may not be positive. So in summary, designing spaces can include different levels of stimulation, helpful and unhelpful, and it needs to be designed carefully. Now, I'm always happy to discuss design, and if anyone has a particular issue that they would like to talk to me about, please feel free to get in touch at any time. So thanks for listening to our first DEB Talks for the year, and I really look forward to chatting to you all again in a couple of months. Thanks again, and bye for now.